recently, as in yesterday, uh, Donald Trump and Chris Wallace sat down for an interview, and I've seen. I haven't watched the whole interview yet, but there have been numerous clips floating around. One of the funniest, I think, was one we'll get to here, where Trump said that Biden signed an agreement to uh, defund the police if he's elected, even though that was not part of the compact he signed with Bernie Sanders. Now, Biden has said that he thinks that some funding should be moved from police to other areas, which is a good start. But it's especially funny because Trump has been using images of Seattle and Minneapolis and other areas in his ads to claim that this is what a Biden presidency would be. That we would see the kind of things that are happening in Trump's America under a Biden presidency. And I thought it would be interesting to go over this. This is a little different from what I normally do. This isn't an explicit takedown of some conservative idiot. This is a discussion between a Chris Wallace is an interesting person, I think. He seems to be somewhat more liberal than what you would expect for someone on Fox News. I remember reading an interview with him when he was chosen to host one of the debates between Trump and Hillary back in 2016, because I worked for the New York Times customer service at the time, so I had full access to their website, all their articles, and they did an interview with him, and it was pretty interesting. I mean, he still seems to be more on the conservative end of the spectrum, but he's not as, at least from what I've seen, not as rabidly anti-liberal or anti-progress as, again, you would expect a Fox News host to be. And the clips I've seen of this interview are pretty good. Pretty interesting, so I thought it'd be fun to go over it and talk about some of the things that are brought up here. At the very least, just see what we see. And I realize that the internet has poisoned me because I termed this in my stream info as a debate rather than the interview it is. But I think it has more in common with an Internet Bloodsport debate than either person involved would be comfortable admitting. So let's get into it. So, Mr. Wallace, take it away.
And hello again from Fox News in
And yes, I am watching this a little bit sped up because it's 40 goddamn minutes long.
Washington today from the White House. We're on the president's patio just outside the Oval Office. President Trump, you've agreed to answer all manner of questions, no subject off limits. Thank you, and welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with the surge of the coronavirus across the country in recent months. You still talk about it as, quote, burning embers. But I want to put up a chart that shows where we are with the illness over the last 4 months. As you can see, we hit a peak here in April, 36,000 cases.
Cases.
A day.
Yeah, cases.
Then it went down, and now since June, it has gone up, more than doubled. One day this week, 75,000 new cases, more than double.
Chris, that's because we have great testing, because we have the best testing in the world. If we didn't test, you wouldn't be able to show that chart. If we tested half as much, those numbers would be down.
But this isn't burning embers, sir. This is a forest fire.
But
This is something Trump has been going on about very recently, about how if we didn't test so much, our numbers wouldn't be so bad, which is basically like saying that if you ignore the smoke, then there's no fire to worry about. Seems like Wallace is going to make a similar analogy here. If we didn't test, if we just assumed nobody had it, then yes, our numbers on paper would be down, but we would still have people being infected. We would still have people getting sick, flooding hospitals, and taking those resources. So, I mean, I don't think I need to spend too much time debunking this absurd claim Trump has been making that because we test so much, that's the reason why our numbers are so high. And if we didn't test, our numbers would be lower. They would be lower, but it would not reflect reality. And there's some question as to whether our numbers accurately reflect reality as it is, given how limited testing was there for a while and how it still is in some areas. Waganator, yes. Socialism has produced many positive things. The 40-hour work week, the 8-hour workday, the 5-day work week, vacation pay, overtime pay. All the things that many workers enjoy today were the result of socialists and anarchists agitating for them 100 years ago or so. And cool. He was one person.
I don't say. I say flames. We'll put out the flames, and we'll put out, in some cases, just burning embers. We also have burning embers. We have embers, and we do have flames. Florida became more flame-like, but it's going to be under control. And you know, it's not just this country. It's many countries. We don't talk about it in the news. They don't talk about Mexico and Brazil and still parts of Europe, which actually got hit sooner than us, so it's a little ahead of us in that sense. But you take a look. Why don't they talk about Mexico, which is not helping us? And all I can say is, thank God I built most of the wall, because if I didn't have the wall up, we would have a much bigger problem with Mexico.
But, sir, we have the 7th highest mortality rate in the world. Our mortality rate is higher than Brazil.
Yes, because socialism has been stamped out pretty hard anywhere people have tried to build it because of capitalist imperialism, yes. But that's why we're working on building it here in America, so that we can subvert the strongest force for imperialism. And again, we don't need to prove the benefits. We don't need to do something good with a system to prove it's worth implementing, because when liberal democracy and capitalism were introduced with the American experiment, they hadn't been successful anywhere, and people could make the same arguments against it that they did, that people are making against socialism now. Oh, it's not stamped out easily, Waganator. That depends on how you define positive. But there have been very few actual socialist nations in the world, so yeah, I'm comfortable saying not exactly no. But again, that's not really an argument.
It's higher than Russia, and the European Union has us on a travel ban.
Yeah, I think what we'll do, well, we have them on a travel ban too, Chris. I closed them off. If you remember, I was the one that did the European Union very early. But when you talk about mortality rates, I think it's the opposite. I think we have one of the lowest mortality rates in the world.
Well, we're going to take a look. We had 900 deaths on a single day.
We will take a look.
This week.
Ready?
You can check it out.
Could you please get me the mortality rate?
Yeah.
Kaylee's right here. I heard we had one of the lowest, maybe the lowest mortality rate anywhere in the world. You have the numbers, please? Because I heard we had the best mortality rate. Number one low mortality rate. I hope you show this in there because it shows what fake news is all about. Okay,
I don't think I'm fake news, but we'll put our stats on.
You said we had the worst mortality rate in the world, and we have the best.
So it's plausible that we may have one of the lowest mortality rates per capita because of how large our population is, but we still have one of the highest, mortality rates in general. The highest number of people who are dying from COVID-19. So this is, again, numbers being used to obscure facts.
All right, it's a little complicated, but bear with us. We went with numbers from Johns Hopkins University, which charted the mortality rate for 20 countries hit by the virus. The U.S. ranked 7th, better than the United Kingdom, but worse than Brazil and Russia. The White House went with this chart from the European CDC, which shows Italy and Spain doing worse, but countries like Brazil and South Korea doing better. Other countries doing better, like Russia, aren't included in the White House chart. California, locking down again. Florida, deadliest day of the entire pandemic. hospitals at capacity in a number of places around the country, shortages of testing, shortages of personal protective equipment.
Wagner, the reason why we continue to advocate for socialism is because socialism has a solid academic basis and doesn't try to stamp out people based on their accident of birth, whereas Nazism is explicitly based on uh, the superiority of one race and the negative and inferiority of another race. No, it hasn't. You're going to quote the Black Book of Communism, which quotes 100 million dead, which counts things like deaths in wartime from the Red Army, people dying of old age, people dying of diseases that didn't have a cure, or everything was done to help them, but they still died anyway. Those numbers are inflated. In fact, capitalism kills roughly 100 million people every 4 to 5 years. So even if we accept the Black Book of Communism's numbers as accurate, capitalism kills more than communism has every 5 years. So yes, I have heard of the Holodomor. I'm not. Why should I be embarrassed for being a socialist in the 21st century? And the Holodomor was not a product of socialism. The Holodomor was a product of, depending on who you talk to, either a total accident that no one could control, or an ethnic cleansing attempt by the Stalin regime to deal with political dissidents. So, yeah, you're just wrong there.
And for nurses and doctors, a lot of people say this is because we don't have a national plan. You talk about states. We don't have a national plan. Do you take responsibility for that?
Look, I take responsibility always for everything because it's ultimately my job too. I have to get everybody in line. Some governors have done well. Some governors have done poorly. They're supposed to have supplies. They didn't have. I supplied everybody. Now we have somewhat of a surge in certain areas.
Trump is lying here. He specifically declined providing resources to states, and when states went through other channels to get the resources they need, like masks and ventilators and what have you, he specifically stepped in and confiscated those resources for the national stockpile. So he is absolutely bald-faced lying right here.
Areas, and other areas we're doing great, but we have a surge in certain areas. But you don't hear people complaining about ventilators. We've got all the ventilators we can use. We're supplying them to other countries. We go out into parking lots and everything. Everybody gets a test. We find if we did half the testing. With all of that being said, I'm glad we did it. This is the right way to do it. I'm glad we did what we're doing. But we have more tests by far than any country in the world.
But, sir, testing is up 37%.
Well, that's good.
I understand. Cases are up 194%. It isn't just that testing has gone up, it's that the virus has spread. The positivity rate has increased.
Many of those cases,
worse than it was.
Many of those cases are young people that would heal in a day. They have the sniffles, and we put it down as a test.
Again, this is absolutely untrue. Young people may not die from COVID-19 as easily as older people, but they still suffer a number of negative side effects of the disease. I saw let me see if I can find it real quick. There was someone went through the numbers of what's happening with people who contract COVID. Let's see. Come on. Here it is. Yeah. So, how can a disease with 1% mortality shut down the United States? The two problems with this question: it neglects the law of large numbers, and it assumes that one of two things happen: you die or you're 100% fine. U.S. has a population of 328 million people. So 1% of 328 million people, if they get infected, is 3 million dead. So even if you're okay with 3 million dead, and don't think that wouldn't tank the economy, that if 3 million people drop dead over the next 6 months, that wouldn't completely destroy the economy. There are other effects of catching COVID, even if you survive. For each one person who dies, so of the 3 million, so for one person in this group here, 19 more require hospitalization, 18 more, 18 of those will have permanent heart damage for the rest of their lives, 10 will have permanent lung damage, 3 will have strokes, which can completely, from an economic capitalist perspective, a stroke is functionally equivalent to a death because you no longer are valuable to the market. You no longer are able to provide value to the market because you can't work, you can't provide value in that way. So if we're just completely dispassionately looking at the effect on the economy, completely ignoring people's comfort or quality of life, just completely looking at this from the capitalist economy perspective, those 3 with strokes are functionally dead because they will be unlikely to not a stroke doesn't always remove you from the economy, but it often does. And again, it depends on age and a lot of other factors. 2 will have neurological damage that leads to chronic weakness and loss of coordination. Again, that just purely from this economic standpoint, completely takes you out of the economy. And 2 will have neurological damage that leads to loss of cognitive function, which can definitely lead to a tank in the economy. So 3 million dead, another 62 million hospitalized, 59 million with permanent heart damage, almost 33 million people with permanent lung damage, 9 million, close to 10 million people with strokes, 6.5 million with muscle weakness, and another 6.5 million people with loss of cognitive function. So this is why when we talk about a disease with a 1 to 2% mortality rate, this is what we're talking about, why the mortality rate isn't necessarily the most important thing, even if that were the only thing, it still would have a massive impact. Survival doesn't mean you continue unscathed. Even if it's something as minor as losing your taste, which happened to a cousin and uncle of mine who both contracted mild cases of coronavirus. Even if it's just loss of your sense of taste, that still affects your quality of life.
Many of them, don't forget, I guess it's like 99.7%. People are going to get better, and in many cases, they're going to get better very quickly. We go out and we look, and then on the news, look, if you go back to the news, all of even your wonderful competitors, you'll see cases are up. Well, cases are up. Many of those cases shouldn't even be cases. Cases are up because we have the best testing in the world, and we have the most testing.
So functionally what he's saying here is that because the majority of people who test positive will not die, that they shouldn't count as cases because they're not going to die, even though we've just seen that just because you don't die doesn't mean that you don't have some sort of permanent knock-on effect, long-term effect.
No country has ever done what we've done in terms of testing. We are the envy of the world, they call, and they say the most incredible job anybody's done is our job on testing, because we're going to...
This is one of Trump's verbal tics. You can tell when he's lying because someone, he'll say, they're calling and telling me that this is amazing, we're the best, or whatever verbiage he wants to use. But it's when he attributes it to some random person who's called and told him. Nobody's calling him and telling him these things. Even when they're true, no one is going to call and tell him that we have the best testing. It's just absurd.
very shortly be up to 50 million tests. You look at other countries, they don't even do tests. They do tests if somebody walks into the hospital, they're sick, they're really sick, they test them then, or they'll test them in a doctor's office. But they don't go around and have massive areas of testing, and we do. And I'm glad we do.
Again, a lie. Places like South Korea had the kind of drive-in testing that we're now getting set up in some places here back in fucking March. Or maybe it was April, but they had it very quickly. Many places understood that the only way we can get this taken care of is to have mass testing available for everyone, and so they did. They made it available. And lo and behold, they dealt with it because they could isolate people who were who tested positive for coronavirus, and able to isolate them, quarantine them, and keep them safe and away from people who hadn't been infected, so that the disease could run its course. This leave everything open, don't worry about testing or anything that we have in America is what is leading to the issues we're having now.
But it really skews the numbers.
I'm going to do you a favor, because I'm sure a lot of people listening right now are going to say, Trump, he tries to play it down. He tries to make it not seem as serious as it is.
No, this is very serious.
75,000 cases a day.
Show me the death chart.
Well, I don't have the death chart.
The death chart is much more important.
The death chart is 1,000 cases a day.
Excuse me. It's all too much. It shouldn't be one case. It came from China. They should have never let it escape. They should have never let it out. But it is what it is. Take a look at Europe. Take a look at the numbers in Europe. And by the way, they're having surges.
Cases are 6,000 in the whole European Union.
They don't test. They don't test like we test.
Is it possible that they don't have the virus as badly as we do?
It's possible that they don't test. That's what's possible. We find cases, and many of those cases heal automatically. We're finding, in a way, we're creating trouble. Certainly we're creating trouble for the fake news to come along and say, oh, we have more cases. Look, we did something.
It's been bothering me this whole thing. I can't tell if it's the compression of YouTube or if he just has makeup caked on. But his nose and chin and right under his eyelids, but it looks like this looks like it's not loading properly, like when a video game loads the low poly textures before it loads the full textures. But it just looks weird as fuck. This is unusual for what I usually see of Trump. And hey, Dodge, thanks for resubscribing, man. I really appreciate it.
Something that nobody's ever done. Not only the ventilators, where we're supplying them all over the world. We did a testing program, the likes of which nobody's ever done before.
The head of the CDC, Dr. Redfield, said this on Tuesday.
I do think the fall and the winter of 2020 and 2021 are going to be probably one of the most difficult times that we've experienced in American public health.
Do you agree with Dr. Redfield?
I don't know, and I don't think he knows. I don't think anybody knows with this. This is a very tricky deal.
True, Wizard's Red Book, yes. Like an orange peel, very true, yes.
Everybody thought the summer it would go away and it would come back in the fall. Well, in the summer it came. They used to say the heat was good for it, and it really knocks it out, remember? And then it might come back in the fall. So they got that one wrong. They got a lot wrong. They got a lot wrong. The World Health got a tremendous amount wrong. They basically did whatever China wanted them to, and will save now almost $500 million a year, which is nice. But the World Health got a lot wrong.
But this is one of the sharpest criticisms.
Again, this is another lie from Trump. Most of the things that he's accusing the World Health Organization of getting wrong were things that were wrong temporally. One of the big ones that I've seen a lot of people cite is that I think it was the World Health Organization said they were unsure if it would spread human to human. But the reality was when they made that statement, it was pending further testing. Dude boy. Israel did 9/11 wake up. I guess thanks for the follow and thanks for the catch there, Dave. Yeah. So they then revised their statement as further data became available. This is further demonizing science and the scientific method.
Of you.
I agree.
People say that you talk about the world as you'd like to see it rather than follow the science.
No,
Well, let me just ask the question, sir. Why on earth would your administration be involved in a campaign at this point to discredit Dr. Fauci, who is the nation's top infectious disease expert?
Because we're not. If one man from my administration doesn't like him, because he made a few mistakes. Look, Dr. Fauci said don't wear a mask. Dr. Fauci told me not to ban China. It would be a big mistake. I did it over and above his recommendation. Dr. Fauci then said you saved tens of thousands of lives, more than that. He said you saved tens of thousands of lives. Dr. Fauci's made some mistakes, but I spoke to him yesterday at length. I have a very good relationship with Dr. Fauci.
But sir, this weekend, your White House put out a series of statements, so-called mistakes, that Dr. Fauci had made. One of your closest aides, one of your right-hand men, Daniel Scavina, put out this. Have you seen this?
Well,
this Dr. Fawcett, it shows him as a leaker and an alarmist.
I don't know that he's a leaker.
Why would
he's a little
that?
bit of an alarmist. That's okay. A little bit
He's
of an alarmist.
I'm an alarmist?
A little bit of an alarmist. Listen, let me just say, Dr. Fauci at the beginning, and again, I have a great relationship with him. I spoke to him at length yesterday. Dr. Fauci at the beginning said, this will pass, don't worry about it, this will pass. He was wrong. Dr. Fauci said, don't ban China, don't ban China. I did. He then admitted that I was right.
But you made mistakes too.
I guess everybody makes mistakes.
I was going to say, you said at one point,
It's one person coming in from China, and we have it under control. It's going to be just fine. When you have 15 people, and the 15 within a couple of days is going to be down to close to zero, that's a pretty good job we've done. I think we're going to be very good with the coronavirus. I think that at some point that's going to sort of just
You gotta love when it's Fox News compiling these clips of Trump just outright lying about COVID-19.
disappear, I hope. I'll be right eventually. I will be right eventually. You know, I said it's going to disappear. I'll say it again.
But
it's going to disappear.
Does that discredit
and I'll
you?
be right. I don't think so.
Right.
I don't think so. You know why it doesn't discredit? Because I've been right probably more than anybody else.
Then there are masks. From the first day,
There's another verbal Trump tick. It's not that he's right about some things. He's right more than anyone else. It's not that we have good testing. We have the best testing. I mean, this is something people have been pointing out for 5 years. But, yeah. He has not, particularly with regards to the coronavirus, he has not been right about anything so far. Maybe, I can't remember if it's true that Fauci said not to ban China, but if that is the case, I have no issue giving that one to Trump. If Fauci said not to ban it, and, banning travel from, even though it didn't work and it came too late.
that the CDC said that people should wear masks on April 3rd, you said you weren't going to. You wore a mask for the first time in public at Walter Reed this weekend. Question, the CDC says if everybody wore a mask for 4 to 6 weeks, we could get this under control. Do you regret not wearing a mask in public from the start? And will you consider a national mandate that people need to wear masks?
No, I want people to have a certain freedom, and I don't believe in that, no. And I don't agree with the statement that if everybody wear a mask, everything disappears. Hey, Dr. Fauci said don't wear a mask. Our Surgeon General, terrific guy, said don't wear a mask. Everybody was saying don't wear a mask. All of a sudden, everybody's got to wear a mask. And as you know, masks cause problems too. With that being said, I'm a believer in masks. I think masks are good. But I leave it up to the governors. Many of the governors are changing. They're more mask into. They like the concept of masks. But some of them don't agree. I do say this. Schools have to open. Young people have to go to school. And there's problems when you don't go to school, too. And there's going to be a funding problem because we're not going to fund, when they don't open their schools, we're not going to fund them. We're not going to give them money if they're not going to school, if they don't open
2 points on that. First of all, what the federal government gives is 8%.
10%. And you know what? That's a lot of money.
And you're going to take them, you know where the money goes? It goes overwhelmingly to disadvantaged kids and children with disabilities.
Let the school.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do that, Wizard's Bread Book. I agree, I would like to do that, but I'm not sure how to.
Should send more money so the schools will be safer.
Let the schools open. Did you ever see the statistics on young people below the age of 18? The state of New Jersey had thousands of deaths. Of all of these thousands, one person below the age of 18 in the entire state. One person. And that was a person that had, I believe he said diabetes. One person below the age of 18 died in the state of New Jersey. During all of this, they had a hard time. And they're doing very well now. So that's it.
The stimulus bill is running out the end of this month. The Republicans say that
I guess I can just turn it off till I get a new follower who's not a Nazi.
they want liability limits, which the Democrats don't like. You say that you want a payroll tax cut, which even some Republicans are cool to.
Well, a lot of Republicans like it, though.
Will you only sign a bill that has those two provisions?
Well, we're going to see, but we do need protections because businesses are going to get sued just because somebody walked in. You don't know where this virus comes from. They'll sit down at a restaurant. They'll sue the restaurant. The guy's out of business. Right. So we do need some kind of a immunity. You do need it, just like you need immunity for the police, okay? Whether they like it or not, you need immunity for the police.
Look at him slip in about the police. We don't need qualified for immunity for the police, but I'm sure we'll get to that soon.
police. But they do need a form of immunity. You don't know if they caught it, and nobody's ever going to be able to prove it one way or the other. You can't put these, the people out. Look, the Democrats don't want to do that because they're totally captured by the lobby of lawyers. The lawyers' lobby is probably the most powerful in the country.
What about the payroll tax cut?
I want to see it. I want to see
And
it.
if it isn't in the bill?
I'll have to see. But yeah, I would consider not signing it if we don't have a payroll tax cut, yes.
Hot enough for you here, Mr. President?
It's hot. It's about, sort of almost record-breaking stuff.
We wanted to do it inside. This was your choice.
But I wanted you to sweat a little bit.
Well, we both are. There has been a spike in violent crime in America in recent weeks. We've seen deaths up in New York, deaths up in Chicago, shootings. How do you explain it, and what are you going to do about it?
I explain it very simply by saying that they're Democrat-run cities. They're liberally run. They're stupidly run. We have forced them in Seattle to end the CHOP because, we were going in that following day. You probably have heard it. We were getting ready to go in. We were all set. And when they heard that we were going, they set their police force.
Liberal Democrats have been running cities in this country for decades.
Poorly.
Why is it so bad right now?
They've run them poorly. It was always bad, but now it's gotten totally out of control. And it's really because they want to defund the police. And Biden wants to defund the police.
Sir, he does not.
Look, he signed a charter with Bernie Sanders. I will get that one, just like I was right on the mortality rate. Did you read the charter that he agreed to?
It says nothing about defunding the
Oh,
police.
really? It says abolish. It says defund. Let's go.
All right.
Give me the charter, please.
All right.
Chris, you've got to start studying for these.
He says defund the police.
He says defund the police. They talk about abolishing the police. They talk about illegal aliens pouring.
I look forward to seeing that. Meanwhile,
So I'm sure that there is some language in there about moving towards abolishing ICE, because I know that was one thing that Bernie was wanting to do, was to change and abolish ICE. But there's nothing in this charter about abolishing the police. And again, Biden has made some noise in recent days and weeks about defunding, about moving funding away from police to other areas, which is what we want with defunding the police. While yes, eventually we would like to abolish the police, as an anarchist, the police are terrible. But in our current situation, we can't really abolish police the way we would want to, so let's work on defunding them, which is something we can do. We do have some popular support for, so that we can move money to things which will help prevent crime and prevent the things which have caused the recent protests and rebellions.
the George Floyd murder has reignited the issue of racism in policing in this country. I want to give you a couple of statistics. Nationwide, blacks are twice as likely, fewer in absolute numbers, but in terms of per capita, blacks are twice as likely to be shot and killed by police as whites are. In Minneapolis, over the last 5 years, police used force against blacks at a rate 7 times that against whites. Can you understand why blacks would be angry at that?
Of course I do. Of course I do. Many whites are killed also. You
I
have
understand
to say that. I mean, many whites are killed.
And of course, he does the redirection that a lot of racists do, that, well, a lot of white people are killed by police too. And even Chris Wallace said the same thing. Fewer black people in numbers are killed than white people, but they're twice as likely per capita, which is the important number, because when you're looking at proportional populations, even if you have 700 people killed of one, 700 of one race and 500 of another race, but if there's 3 times as many of the first race as the second race, then the numbers don't add up. So this is a common redirection that a lot of white supremacist racists will use to counter the police brutality narrative.
I hate the sound, but this is going on for decades. This is going on for a long time, long before I got here. If you look at what's gone on in Portland, those are anarchists, and we've taken a very tough stand. If we didn't take a stand in Portland, we've arrested many of these leaders. If we didn't take that stand, right now you would have a problem like they were going to lose Portland. So let's see what this says here.
There was little chance of the right losing Portland. Portland is somehow, unfortunately, a bastion of white supremacist groups. The police are very much embedded with white supremacist groups. There's a reason why Andy Ngo is so fond of going to Portland, because he knows he'll receive a warm reception from the groups there.
prosecution, sanctuary cities, incentivize illegal alien, expand asylum, abolish immigration detention. No,
that's not.
Well, no, we'll find it.
Okay.
This thing is many pages long. End prosecution of illegal border crossers.
Yeah, he's conflating the immigration reforms that Bernie was pushing for with the idea of defunding police. This is honestly, I don't know if this is Trump being stupid or if he is deliberately trying to conflate the two, because while they are related, defunding ICE is not the same thing. Defunding or abolishing ICE, immigration services, is not the same as defunding or abolishing the police in general.
Support deathly, and these are the worst things.
Sir, I'm not disagreeing with you on any of those. I'm disagreeing about defund police. The White House never sent us evidence the Bernie Biden platform calls for defunding or abolishing police, because there is none. It calls for increased funding for police departments that meet certain standards. Biden has called for redirecting some police funding for related programs like mental health counseling. This week, you said that Black Lives Matter and the Confederate flag are both issues of freedom.
Well, hello, don't wear a mask. Your name is quite interesting. Please wear a mask in public. I want to go to the movies again.
Freedom of speech. But in the case of the Confederate flag, there are a lot of people who say these were traitors who split from this country, fought this country in large part to preserve slavery. Is the Confederate flag offensive?
It depends on who you're talking about, when you're talking about. When people proudly had their Confederate flags, they're not talking about racism. They love their flag. It represents the South. They like the South. People right now like the South. I say it's freedom of many things, but it's freedom of speech.
So you're not offended?
Do I really even need to go over why the Confederate flag is not about just wholesome, harmless Southern heritage and how it's explicitly a representation of hatred and white supremacy? Particularly the flag that is considered the Confederate flag, because that is just the battle standard of Lee's Army of Virginia. It was used very seldomly during the war, just when Lee was on the field. So yeah, this is just propaganda bullshit. Hi, U.S. Fighter. How's it going?
Offended by?
Well, I'm not offended either by Black Lives Matter. That's freedom of speech. And you know, the whole thing with cancel culture, we can't cancel our whole history. We can't forget that the North and the South fought. We have to remember that. Otherwise, we'll end up fighting again. You can't.
Oh, cancel culture. No one is trying to cancel the Civil War or erase it from our history books. We're just trying to remove the veneration of its figures and heroes from public squares, which is what the monuments and the flags do, is they create spots of veneration. Molly Conger, who's I know from Twitter, does a pretty common sort of tour of Charlottesville and the various Confederate monuments there, which are gathering points for white supremacist groups. So if we remove those statues, then we give them less rational or less valid a reason to gather in public places. Drive them underground, make them less important.
You can't just cancel all.
But let me ask you this one. It gets to be more than just cancel. Well, maybe this is cancel culture.
What do you mean by a demo, U.S. Fighter?
The National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, you have threatened to veto it because in the bill, and this is supported by Republicans as well as Democrats, it would rename Army bases named for Confederate generals. Now, this is a bill that funds military operations. It gives soldiers a pay raise. Yeah. You're going to veto that?
Because they'll get their pay raise. Hey, look, don't tell me this. I got soldiers.
No, I'm an anarchist. I tend to support the Democrats for federal elections because unfortunately we live in a first past the post two-party system, so it's either it's either vote for the neoliberal party that generally tries to do as little as possible, or vote for the openly fascist party, which is trying to do as much as possible. But I do not generally support the Democrats, no, particularly in local elections. I'm a member of the Democratic Socialist Party here in my hometown.
The biggest pay raises in the history of our military. I got soldiers brand new equipment, brand new jets, brand new rockets, brand new 2.5 trillion. I did more for the military than any president that's ever had this office. Because I think that Fort Bragg, Fort Robert E. Lee, all of these forts that have been named that way for a long time, decades and decades.
But the military says they're for this.
Excuse me. I don't care what the military says. I'm supposed to make the decision. Fort Bragg is a big deal. We won 2 world wars. Nobody even knows General Bragg. We won 2 world wars. Go to that community where Fort Bragg is, in a great state. I love that state. Go to the community. Say, how do you like the idea of renaming Fort Bragg? And then what are we going to name it? You going to name it after the Reverend Al Sharpton? What are you going to name it, Chris? Tell me what you're going to name it. So
there are dozens of better generals. Fort Bragg was named after a Confederate general, right? I believe that's the controversy there. Braxton Bragg, general in the Confederate Army. Yeah, that's what I thought. So there are plenty of generals who weren't part of a rebellion. Hey, the best politics. Thanks for the follow. Now I can turn my new follower back on because I don't have a Nazi there. But I do. I would support Fort Jesse Jackson for his Rainbow Coalition. Actually, Fort Fred Hampton. There we go. But no, there are plenty of generals. If we need to name a military fort after a general, there are plenty of generals who weren't members of a military in open rebellion against the United States. I mean, they're all part of the imperialist war machine that has wreaked havoc around the globe, but at least they wouldn't be in open rebellion against the nation they're the fort is ostensibly trying to defend. Fort Alexander Berkman, yes.
There's a whole thing here. We won 2 world wars. 2 world wars, beautiful world wars that were vicious and horrible, and we won them out of Fort Bragg.
Which were they, beautiful or vicious and horrible?
We won out of all of these forts that now they want to throw those names away. And no, I'm against that. And you know what?
Fort Willem von Spranson, there we go, yeah. Yeah, Wizard's Red Book.
What most other people are, and I don't believe in polls because I see the fakest polls I've ever seen, but that poll is a 64% thing, which actually surprised me. We won world wars out of these military bases. No, I'm not going to go changing them. I'm not going to go changing them. I might.
At Mount Rushmore on July 3rd, you said that we face a far
Blue lives don't matter.
left fascism in this country. And then you said this.
Our children are taught in school to hate their own country and to believe that the men and women who built it were not heroes, but that were villains.
You said our children are taught in school to hate our country. Where do you see that?
I just look at school. I watch, I read, look at the stuff. Now they want to change. If 1492, Columbus discovered America. You know, we grew up, you grew up, we all did. That's what we learned. Now they want to make it the 1619 Project. Where did that come from? What does it represent? I don't even know.
It's slavery.
That's what they're saying, but they don't even know. They just want to make a change. Cancel.
Ugh, cancel culture. I hate that fucking phrase because it's so stupidly misused. Yeah, the 1619 Project is about slavery. It's not about the discovery of America, which, yeah, Columbus is credited with discovery of America because that's when Europe, Western Europe, became aware of America. I really don't feel like going into the vagaries of that because it's one of those situations where, while I agree with the idea behind delegitimizing Columbus, and I hold no love for Christopher Columbus, it's really kind of pointless who discovered America. What's important is the events that happened subsequent to that, with the Spanish conquistadors and the English colonization and all the shit that happened afterwards. Whether Columbus was the first or not, he wasn't, is really irrelevant to world history. But Trump is trying to say that these schools are teaching kids to hate Americans when it's not that schools are teaching kids to hate America or American history or what have you. It's that we're trying to get thanks for the follow, US Fighter. Appreciate it. But what we're trying to do here is remove this very propagandistic, one-sided view that a lot of people have of America and her history to better what's the word to better understand our history and the people who did it. Because one thing now, I'm 32. I'll be 33 here in a couple of weeks. So I went to school in the late 90s, early 2000s, which is kind of a weird bubble of time because we would move past the hyper jingoistic education of like the 80s and early 90s and into the but we hadn't quite moved into the what most people probably consider the SJW phase of education today. So I was able to learn a sort of mix that like our founding fathers were not these heroic gods who strode across the land and bestowed freedom upon everyone. We learned that they were a little more human than what some people older than me might have learned. But I wasn't given this education where they were these terrible, wretched human beings who just wanted to spread white supremacy to everyone, which is, to be clear, just as false as the jingoistic gods. It is somewhere in the middle. I'm not saying I got the perfect education, but seeing them as humans, fallible humans who had some good ideas but made mistakes, is probably the best way to educate these people, to educate people in general. I mean, so what kids are learning is that America is not the first or the best nation. We're not. We're a good nation. We have some really great systems that, if properly utilized, can create a great system, a great nation. But our education sucks. Our healthcare sucks. Our economy is basically based off of trapping people in low-wage jobs so that they can't better themselves. There are so many parts of our of the American system that could easily be improved by the existing systems within it. But you have people like Trump who are trying to say that things are perfect, our system is perfect, our country is perfect, we don't need to change anything. And then you have people like Nancy Pelosi who just want to make tiny incremental changes, which will not amount to anything for 50 years. But there's there's a very there's a way to teach people, teach kids especially, where you teach them the history, the true history, but also can teach them what was bad about that history. Like Thomas Jefferson was an intelligent, liberal-minded academic who also cheated on his wife and slept with slaves and kept slaves, and didn't see the hypocrisy there, at least as far as I can tell. I know he referred to slavery as a hideous blot, but he still participated in it. And while we can make some arguments about how they needed to maintain a certain standard of living, Uh, I'm less sympathetic to that argument than I was previously. Um, so yeah, our kids are learning that our forefathers, those who came before, were human and fallible, and this just fucks with conservatives who want to believe that our predecessors were perfect. And the new follower label is off again. Poop Jupiter, thank you, nice alt. That the best you can come up with? So yes, our predecessors were fallible humans who made mistakes, but they still had some good ideas. I think that's the best way to teach American history. It's the best way to teach world history, because world history is not made by gods, by infallible, omniscient people, but by humans who fart and cheat on their significant others and lie, but who also have good ideas.
Culture. I hate the term actually, but I use
But
it.
are they teaching
Cancel
people
culture.
to hate
Oh,
America?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Look at the professors. Look at what's going on in the colleges. If a conservative goes on a
I mean, the fact that Jefferson believed that the Jefferson was kind of an early Trotskyite because he believed that the ideal form of government was one with a regular revolution. That one of my favorite quotes by Jefferson: "The tree of liberty must be renewed from time to time by the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure." This idea that we need a revolution every so often to remind the government that their power comes from the people, and that if they don't treat the people right, then their government is illegitimate. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of propaganda, particularly over the last 100 years or so, uh, to uh, divide people from their role in government, to make it seem like government uh, is this hallowed body that we can't change, particularly without going through the instruments uh, of the society, of the government, and that we just need to accept it, and that this is the best we can do. This end of history narrative that has been very popular. I mean, just think, it's been 70 years since we added a new state to the country, even though Puerto Rico has been overdue for statehood for decades.
college. And look, we have as many as them. Excuse me. I think, to the best of my knowledge, we're sitting at the White House, and the Oval Office is right behind me. We have as many as them. But
Who's them?
the liberal, radical left, and I'm not talking all. I think liberal. I could tell you I like a lot of liberal people. I like a lot of liberal governors and senators. But Chris, we have a radical left, destructive.
Uh, yeah, U.S. fighter. The patronizing one in Washington D.C. with the black dude kneeling. Yeah, I think that one should be taken down 100%. But most of the other Lincoln statues that I've seen are probably fine.
Ideology, and it's being taught in our schools. And don't act like you're surprised to hear this. There are books written about it, and we can't let that
Who's your streamer, U.S. fighter? I'll be happy to take them on if they have a topic in mind.
go on. We can't let them change the true meaning of what we're all about. And that's what they're trying to do, and I don't want it to happen. Not on my watch. It's not going to happen on my watch.
Mr. President, you'll be happy to know that Fox News has a new poll out today, and you're going to be the very first person to hear about it. In the national horse race, Joe Biden leads you by 8 points, 49% to 41. That's, I think, 3-4 points slimmer than it was a month ago. And on the issues, people trust Biden more to handle the coronavirus by 17 points, on race relations by 21 points, and even on the economy, they trust Biden more by 1 point. I understand we still have more than 100 days to this election, but at this point, you're losing.
First of all, I'm not losing, because those are fake polls. They were fake in 2016, and now they're even more fake. The poll.
Oh, Trump is doing his best to delegitimize an election that is 3 months away. He has already gone on record saying that he'll have to wait and see about trusting the election results. He did the same song and dance in 2016, and even when he won, he tried to sort of delegitimize it by claiming that 3 million illegal aliens, undocumented immigrants, voted that shouldn't have, or whatever his narrative was. And that's why he lost the popular vote, even though he won the Electoral College, which is what really matters for presidential elections.
Polls were much worse in 2016. They interviewed 22% Republican. Well, how do you do 22% Republican? You see what's going on. I have other polls that put me leading. And we have polls where I'm leading. I have a poll where we're leading in every swing state. And I don't believe that first of all, the Fox polls, whoever does your Fox polls, they're among the worst. They got it all wrong in 2016. They've been wrong on every poll I've ever seen.
I must tell you.
No, I'm just telling you. And let me ask you this. So on the economy, so I've always led on the economy by a lot.
I know, which is why I was
Biden
surprised
can't
by this
put
number.
two sentences together. They wheel him out. He goes up. He repeats. They ask him questions. He reads a teleprompter, and then he goes back into his basement. You tell me the American people want to have that in an age where we're in trouble with other nations that are looking to do numbers on us.
So let me ask.
So, Poop Jupiter, love that name. I haven't seen any Joe Biden lawn posters yet. True. I think that's largely due to both the general apathy that a lot of people have for this election. Most of the people who were excited about the election had the person they were excited about eliminated, either by legitimate polls or by less legitimate voting. But also because nobody is really... even me, who will vote for Biden in November unless something changes with the Democratic Party significantly, I'm not excited for Biden. What I am excited for is removing the orange fascist from power. Because while I don't think Biden will bring about much significant change, although I think he'll bring about more positive change than Trump will, I know that it will be easier to agitate for change in a Biden presidency than in a Trump presidency. And I think that the events in Portland with people getting black bagged bear this out.
Direct question. No, I'm going to ask you a direct question about Joe Biden. Is Joe Biden senile?
I don't want to say that. I say he's not competent to be president. To be president, you have to be sharp and tough and so many other things. He doesn't even come out of his basement. They think, oh, this is a great campaign. So he goes in. I'll then make a speech. It'll be a great speech. And some young guys start writing, Vice President Biden said this. He didn't say it. Joe doesn't know he's alive, okay? He doesn't know he's alive. Do the American people want that? Number one. Number two, I built the greatest economy ever built anywhere in the world. Not only in this country, anywhere in the world. Until we got hit with the China virus. We got hit with a virus. Shouldn't have happened. And we had to close up. We saved millions of lives. Now we've opened it up. Got to go back to school. We're open. We got to do things. We had the best job numbers we've ever had last month.
Keep in mind that this best economy was not great and mostly the result of Obama-era policies that continued into the early part of the Trump presidency. And arguably, Trump's tariffs slowed down economic growth. So he's just wrong here, completely lying.
We should have good ones coming up in 2 weeks. Look, I built the greatest economy in history. I'm now doing it again. You see the numbers. The numbers are through the roof. The Democrats are purposely keeping their schools closed, keeping their states closed. I called Michigan. I want to have a big rally in Michigan. Do you know we're not allowed to have a rally in Michigan? Do you know we're not allowed to have a rally in Minnesota? Do you know we're not allowed to have a rally in Nevada? We're not allowed to have rallies in these Democrat-run states.
Some people would say that that's a health risk.
Some people would say fine.
But I
guarantee
we
you,
had some issues after Tulsa.
if everything was gone 100%, they still wouldn't allow it. They're not allowing me to do it.
That's not true at all. Prior to the coronavirus, even after you were elected, rallies were allowed to be held in Michigan, in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, in these Democrat-run states. This is completely false.
So they're not allowing me to have rallies.
But I got to tell you, if I may, sir, respectfully, in the Fox poll, they asked people who is more competent, whose mind is sounder, Biden beats you in that.
Well, I tell you what, let's take a test. Let's take a test right now. Let's go down. Joe and I will take a test. Let him take the same test that I took.
Incidentally, I took the test too when I heard that you passed it.
Yeah, how did
it's
you
not
do
the
it?
Well, it's not the hardest test.
No, but
it
the last
there's a picture and it says West Side, and it's an elephant.
No. You see, that's all misrepresentation.
Well, that's what it was on the web.
It's all misrepresentation. Because yes, the first few questions are easy, but I'll bet you couldn't even answer the last 5 questions. I'll bet you couldn't. They get very hard.
So, I knew this was coming up because, again, I've seen clips. And this is an example. This isn't the exact one that Chris Wallace showed on there, but it's a similar one. There are different versions of this because you're supposed to give it multiple times to gauge changes. And the idea is these are very simple cognitive decline tests. They're designed to be simple because the idea is to pick out if someone is able to function as an adult. Any adult should ace this test, no problem. Follow these lines. This is easy. Copy the cube. Piss easy. Draw a clock. What animals are these? Memorize this list of words. That might be difficult because I have a shit memory, but I think I can remember 5 words like that. At least I can come up with a mnemonic to remember it in this situation. Tap a hand whenever the letter A is read off. Count backwards from 7. These are all fairly simple tests because the point is to check to make sure you're a functioning adult. Any functioning adult should have zero issue with these tests. Trump boasting about acing the last 5 questions is like him boasting that he schooled a 5th grader in a trivia competition. It's not actually a good thing to boast about. It just means that you're a functional adult.
The last 5
Well, one of them was count back from 100 by 7.
And let me tell you,
Not
you
even
couldn't answer. You couldn't answer
All right, what's the question?
many of the questions. I'd get you the test. I'd like to give it, but I guarantee you that Joe Biden could not answer those questions. Okay. And I answered all 35 questions correctly.
You talk about how you're winning, campaign's going well. Why did you replace Brad Parscale? Isn't that
Because he's a great digital guy. We all like him a lot. But I have somebody that was involved. They were all in the 2016 campaign. And we have Corey and we have all the people. And actually, Steve Bannon's been much better not being involved. He says the greatest president ever. I mean, he's saying things that I said, let's keep Steve out there. He's doing a good job. But they're all involved. If Joe Biden got in, first of all, he won't call the shots. The radical left people that surround him will call. Religion will be gone.
Yeah, to be clear, Biden is not great. Biden is pretty bad. But he crosses that low bar of better than Trump and will not be engaged as heavily in the police state that Trump is trying to create, particularly around the protests. This is why I say it will be easier to agitate for change under a Biden presidency, because at least he won't be engaging unmarked police vehicles with people without name tags or other identification to black bag protesters and get their identifying information. For what purpose, one might ask?
Okay? Life, you could forget about that. The whole question of life. Supreme
when you
Court.
say life, you mean abortion?
Absolutely. 100%. That whole question, which is a very, it's always been a 50-50 thing. It's actually trending a little bit more toward one
when
side.
You say religion is going to be gone, what does that mean?
Look at what they're doing to the churches. They won't let the churches even open if they want to stand in a field 6 feet apart. We've had churches that wanted to stand in fields 6 feet apart. There has never been an administration that's done so much as I have, from tax cuts to regulation cuts to rebuilding the military to getting choice for the vets. Nobody's done the things I've done. Nobody. In 3.5 years, no other president's been able to do what I've done.
You're running in large part on the economy. You built it once. Now we have.
Just completely untrue. Unless we're talking about his cause of the rise of fascism and white supremacy, in which case he's right. At least in the modern era, no president has done more to increase fascist sympathies and white supremacy than Trump. That is absolutely true. No more life for anyone. True, irate lump.
You had the
Life was a mistake.
coronavirus, you're going to build it again. And in fact, you had great jobs numbers in May. You had solid jobs numbers in June. But I want you to look at some projections. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says the unemployment rate at the end of the year will be 10.5%. JP Morgan says in the fourth quarter, GDP will contract by 6.2%. With states now rolling back some of the reopening and well, there are a lot of Republican states that are doing it, like Texas. But here's
they'll be open very
let me just ask my question.
There's no reason for California to be doing what they're doing.
All right,
except for November 3rd.
With the states shutting back the reopening, in a lot of cases, new lockdowns, won't the economy still be a problem for you on election?
I don't think so. I think the economy is expanding and growing beautifully. Now, the Democrats want to keep it closed as long as possible because they think that's good for election. But I think the economy is doing very well. Now we're coming back, and we're coming back at a level that nobody would have thought possible. And by the way, take a look at a gauge, whether you like it or not, the stock market. The stock market, NASDAQ, hit its all-time high.
The stock market is not the indicator of the economy that a lot of people think it is. It is the indicator of the faith that investors and wealthy people have in the economy, but that doesn't necessarily reflect on how the average person interacts with the economy. He's absolutely correct that the stock market has reached record highs multiple times during his presidency. That is absolutely true, but that doesn't mean that the average person has seen the benefits of this economy. Wages are stagnant. Wages are, for the vast majority of people, wages are lower than survival rate. That's why people have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. They've been stagnant since the 70s. There are so many facets of the economy which are not indicated by the Dow Jones or NASDAQ index. And that is why we need to, that is why his, excuse me, his claims about the economy are inaccurate at best.
2 weeks ago, and it's beaten it 14 different times, okay? The stock market, Dow, etc., is 1,000 points away from its all-time high, meaning very close. We're going to have a stock market, perhaps, on November 3rd, that's the highest in history.
I want to talk to you about Obamacare. Since the pandemic hit, millions of people have lost their jobs and thereby lost their health insurance, and almost 500,000 have signed up for Obamacare. Your administration just announced that you're signing on to a lawsuit to overturn Obamacare.
And replace it.
Why does it make sense to overturn Obamacare, with which people now are relying on? Democrats are going to say the man who's wanted to kill Obamacare is going to take away the protection for pre-existing conditions.
First of all, we got rid of the individual mandate. Pre-existing conditions will always be taken care of by me and Republicans, 100%.
But you've been in office 3.5 years. You don't have a plan.
Well, we haven't had, excuse me, you heard me yesterday. We're signing a health care plan within 2 weeks, a full and complete health care plan that the Supreme Court decision on DACA gave me the right to do. So we're going to solve an immigration plan, a health care plan, and various other plans. And nobody will have done what I'm doing in the next 4 weeks. The Supreme Court gave the President of the United States powers that nobody thought the President had by doing what they did, their decision on DACA. And DACA is going to be taken care of also. But we're getting...
This is one of the ways Trump could legitimately steal the election. If he institutes some sort of Medicare for all or universal health care plan, I think that would sway enough public support for him to legitimately win the election in November. So I'm quite torn on that because on the one hand, yes, I want people to get health care. I want that to be available to everyone. I would benefit from it as much as anyone. But at the same time, I feel like that would be something that would last until November 4th, and then it would be repealed or gutted or otherwise destroyed once he was elected.
Getting rid of it because we're going to replace it with something much better. But we got rid of already, which was most of Obamacare, the individual mandate. And that I've already won on. And we won also on the Supreme Court. But the decision by the Supreme Court on DACA allows me to do things on immigration, on healthcare, on other things that we've never done before. And you're going to find it to be a very exciting 2 weeks.
Your niece, Mary Trump, has written a book about you and your family, and one of her main points is that she says your dad, Fred Trump Sr., damaged the whole family. And here's what she says about what you learned from your father.
He learned to become the killer you mentioned, the man who needs to succeed at all costs, who will do anything to get attention, financial rewards, and to win.
Do you see any truth in that?
My father liked to win. My father was a very good man. He was a strong man. It's disgraceful that she said that. She was not exactly a family favorite. We didn't have a lot of respect or like for her. I would have never said that, except she writes a book that's so stupid and so vicious, and it's a lie. My father was a great, wonderful man.
Let me just ask you this
But
question.
this is not a person that I spent...
Anyone trying to deny that Trump's whole attitude is win at any cost, you have to be the victor, that this isn't his attitude, is fucking lying. Trump's whole persona has been about being the winner, the victor. Every single thing he talks about is about he's the best. He's the victor, the winner of whatever it is. And any polls that show him losing are fake polls. And for God's sake, he won the 2016 election, the Electoral College at least, but he still had to delegitimize it and talk about how it was fake news because he lost the popular vote. Wallace asking this question is such a softball stupid.
Very much time with very little time. And now I'm glad.
You've developed a pretty thick skin over the years, from decades of attacks in New York tabloids, now from the press here, and your political opponents here in Washington. But even for Donald Trump, does it hurt you at all to be attacked in such personal terms by a member of your own family?
It hurts me more about attacking my father, not being kind to my mother. I have a mother who was like a saint. She was incredible. She was an incredible woman. And she was...
One thing I remember reading when I was working for the New York Times was about how Trump's brother, I think he was Fred Trump, but I could be wrong. I don't remember his actual name. It doesn't really matter. He was somewhat more empathetic and human than either Donald or his father, and while this may be somewhat slanderous to say, the article I was reading, and this was 5 years ago, so take it with a little bit of a grain of salt, but basically it seemed to indicate that according to family members, Donald and his father harassed his brother to the point where he committed suicide because he couldn't deal with the sociopathy of his family, where his brother and where Donald and his father just kept taunting him about not being a good businessman, about being somewhat empathetic, just mercilessly, because Trump doesn't care about family unless they're doing business with him. I read recently excerpts from Ivana's book about Trump and how he didn't really have any contact with his children until they were 18, until they could start working in the family business and start making money for him, which seems to be very characteristic for Trump. Very much someone who doesn't really care about Trump's doesn't really care about his relationship with these people, just how they can better his position and make him money. And that's how he's been running the country, is whatever he can do to make himself money.
It's nasty even to my mother. She's a very scarred person. She was not much of a family person. But look, let me just tell you, my father was, I think he was the most solid person I've ever met. And he was a very good person. He was a very, very good person. He was strong, but he was good. For her to say the kind of things, a psychopath, that he was a psychopath, anybody that knew Fred Trump would call him a psychopath. And you know what? If he was, I would tell you. And I would say, you know, Chris, I was with my father and it was impossible. My father was, he was tough. He was tough on me. He was tough on all of the kids, but tough in a solid sense, in a really good sense. For her to say, I think the word she used was psychopath. What a disgrace. She ought to be ashamed of herself. That book is a lie.
some people were surprised when you agreed to this interview, to sit down with me.
What are you going to ask?
Especially because of some of the mean tweets that you've said about me. Mike Wallace wannabe, nasty and obnoxious. I will tell you, after that one, my son Peter, who you've met, called and he said, nasty, no, obnoxious, maybe. But here's the question. One of your beefs seems to be that I put Democrats on the show and I ask them questions. And I guess the question I have is, don't you understand it's my job to put Democrats on as well as Republicans and to ask them probing questions just like I ask Republicans?
I'm not a big fan of Fox, I'll be honest with you. They've changed a lot since Roger Ailes. And I watch people like Swalwell, who I don't even know. He goes on the show. He got less than 1%. All of a sudden, he's on being interviewed for endless.
Yeah, but I interviewed Nancy. Wait, I interviewed Nancy. I interviewed. You sent one tweet after I interviewed Nancy Pelosi, and in the interview, I asked her specifically about the fact in February you were in Chinatown pitching tourism while the virus was spreading. If the president underplayed the threat in the early days, Speaker Pelosi, didn't you as well? Isn't that legitimate to talk to the Speaker of the House?
Look, I know you very well. I respect you a lot. I respect your father a lot. I thought he was one of the most talented journalists there are. And you.
This is a common tick of Trump's. Whenever he's confronted with someone he's insulted viciously on social media, but they've done a little bit to kiss his ass in the last 10 minutes, then he's more willing to consider them good people. I love you. I think you're a good person, a wonderful person. It's funny, he's about to compliment Chris Wallace's father. Again, the interview I read with Chris Wallace back in 2016, he was asked about his father, and apparently he isn't terribly fond of his father. He's proud of the work he did, and is at least partially responsible for Chris getting into journalism. But he's not terribly fond of him because he was a pretty absent father. I think it was one of those his parents divorced or were never together. I don't remember the exact circumstances of it, but George Wallace is pretty absent in Chris Wallace's life. So, in fact, I'd have to go back and find that interview and reread it. But I think if I remember correctly, he didn't really significantly interact with George Wallace until he was an adult. So, it's not doing Trump any favors to compliment George Wallace to his son, ironically enough.
Likewise, are a very talented person. I do think this. I think you are very. I think you are toward the Democrat side, which is okay. I mean, it's okay.
It's not true. Watch the James Comey interview I did in December. 17 significant errors in the FISA process, and you say that it was handled in a thoughtful and appropriate way.
Yeah, he's right. I was wrong.
But you make it sound like you're a bystander, an eyewitness. You were the director of the FBI while a lot of this was going on, sir.
Sure. I'm responsible for that. That's why I'm telling you I was wrong. I was overconfident as director in our procedures.
You couldn't do as tough an interview with Comey. I'd like to think I treat everybody the same.
It just seems to me that you are very prone to be nice to the Democrats, and maybe I'm wrong about that, Chris, but it's an honor to be with you. It's fine. I love it. I love it that it's close to 100 degrees.
Your choice.
Keep in mind that in Trump's mind, being soft to the Democrats means not haranguing them for being vicious anti-American socialists, and being mean to Republicans means not deliberately filleting them under the desk. So even if you could make a case for Wallace being a little softer to one side or the other, don't listen to Trump's idea of Wallace being soft on them, because he has very different standards depending on whether there's a D or an R next to their name.
Again.
Yeah, I know. That's okay.
I'm not saying you're going to lose. I am not saying that. We saw how you turned it around last time.
I don't think I'm going to lose at all.
But if you did, how crushing would it be?
First of all, let me just tell you something. I know everyone wants to know that because they'd love to see me lose. Finally.
I am not saying that.
You know how many times I've been written off? Do you know how many times I've been written off?
I've done some of it myself,
My
sir.
whole
I'm not doing
life.
it this time.
Don't do it, because.
But how crushing would it be?
And you know why I won't lose? Because the country, in the end, they're not going to.
See, Trump can't even conceive of the idea of his losing. He's not going to answer this question.
Have a man who's shot. He's shot. He's mentally shot. Let him come out of his basement, go around. I'll make 4 or 5 speeches a day. I'll be interviewed by you. I'll be interviewed by the worst killers that hate my guts. They hate my guts. There's nothing they can ask me that I won't give them a proper answer to. Some people will like it. Some people won't like it.
I agree with that.
But look,
You answered the
let
question.
Biden sit through an interview like this. He'll be on the ground crying for mommy. He'll say, mommy, please take me home.
Well, we've asked him for an interview, sir.
He can't do an interview. He's incompetent. There's a number you don't mention. It's called the enthusiasm number. The enthusiasm for Trump is through the roof,
I have mentioned it.
even higher than last time. The enthusiasm for Biden is non-existent.
The enthusiasm for Trump number among that core 20 to 30% of the United States who is still a Trump supporter is still high. But I feel like there's a corresponding enthusiasm number for not Trump that is equally as high among probably a similar amount of the populace. I don't want to say that there's like 20 to 30% who's balls to the wall for Trump and 70 to 80% that is balls to the wall not Trump. I don't think it's quite that dichotomous. I think there's about 20 or 30 who are for Trump, 20 or 30 who are anyone but Trump, and the remaining 30 to 40% of the nation is open to be swayed. And that I think that's true of just about any election. I think it's just a little more what's the word I'm looking for here? A little more dichotomous this time because of how polarizing Trump is.
Everyone knows he's
But the enthusiasm against you
Well, that's
is high.
okay. That's his only shot. I mean,
Right.
that's his only shot. I agree. And those people know I'm doing a good job, but there's something in my personality that they don't like. Because look, nobody's done what I've done. Biden wants to come in and ruin our country. Triple your taxes. He wants to do things. He wants to add regulations that I've all cut. And we still have regulation, a lot of regulation, but I've cut it down to a level that nobody ever thought possible. He will destroy this country. But
This is another common conservative talking point that the left wants to raise everyone's taxes when no, we just want to raise taxes on the wealthy. Democrats, well, I don't want to say Democrats because they've been pretty complicit in Trump's tax cuts, and obviously Obama failed to sufficiently raise taxes on the wealthy. But that was one thing that Bernie talked about was, and AOC has talked about multiple times, raising taxes on the wealthy because those great periods of American expansionism and positive growth and what have you that we experienced that a lot of conservatives try to harken back to the 50s and 60s. Well, during that time, the top marginal tax rate was somewhere in the 70 to 90%. That meant that if you made more than, I think at the time it was more than 100,000, but now it's more than 10 million or something ridiculous like that, then you were taxed at this 70% tax rate. And then we had a lot of money to put into infrastructure, to put into schools, to put into communities, to put into public transit, to put into healthcare. If we raised the tax like what AOC proposed, like what Bernie proposed, the government would have a lot more money to do the things the government should do, which is take care of the people.
it won't be him. It will be the radical left. The same type ideology that took over Venezuela, one of the richest countries in the world. They now have no water, they have no food, and they have no medicine. That's going to happen
Two final
if
questions.
he wins.
And the reason why Venezuela is so poor is not because of socialism. It's two factors. One, they basically put their entire economy on oil, and when the bottom fell out of the oil market, so did the bottom fall out of their economy. But a lot of Venezuela's problems is because of the capitalists in the country hoarding products and preventing people from purchasing them, thus driving up the prices until it reached a point where they decided, okay, we can make enough money off of this now, we'll sell it.
In general, not talking about November, are you a good loser?
I'm not a good loser. I don't like to lose. I don't lose too often. I don't like to lose.
But are you gracious?
You don't know until you see. It depends. I think mail-in voting is going to rig the election. I really do.
Are you suggesting that you might not accept the results of the election?
I have to see. Look, Hillary Clinton asked me the same thing.
No, I asked you the same thing in the debate.
There is a tradition in this country. In fact, one of the prides of this country is the peaceful transition of power, and that no matter how hard fought a campaign is, that at the end of the campaign, that the loser concedes to the winner. Not saying that you're necessarily going to be the loser or the winner, but that the loser concedes to the winner, and that the country comes together in part for the good of the country. Are you saying you're not prepared now to commit
What
to
I'm
that
saying
principle?
is that I will tell you at the time. I'll keep you in suspense.
Well,
okay?
Chris,
And you know what? She's
This is actually something, one bit of American exceptionalism that I think we can all agree with is that peaceful transfer of power. It's been less of an issue in the last 100 years or so, especially as more countries move to democratic institutions and government styles. But prior to that, in the 18th and 19th century, it wasn't uncommon for a leader to die or abdicate and for a war to break out over who would be his successor, even if there was a clear successor. So the fact that in 250 years, America has managed to maintain a peaceful transfer of power is pretty good. It is a very good thing. And I think November is going to be very interesting should the vote turn against Trump to see what Trump does. If he maintains that peaceful transfer of power, or if he tries to delegitimize and instigate a coup.
She's the one that never accepted it.
I agree.
She never accepted her loss, and
But
she looks like
can
a
you
fool.
can you give a direct answer? You will accept the
I
election?
have to see. Look,
Clinton accepted her loss on election night. Like, she sent her people home, and I believe she announced her concession the next day, or within a day or two, fairly quickly. Saying that she didn't accept her loss is incredible projection.
I have to see. No, I'm not going to just say yes. I'm not going to say no, and I didn't last time either.
Whether it's in 2021 or 2025, how will you regard your years as president of the United States?
I think I was very unfairly treated. From before I even won, I was under investigation by a bunch of thieves, crooks. It was an illegal investigation.
But what about
Russia,
the good parts, sir?
No, I want to go this. I have done more than any president in history in the first 3.5 years, and I've done it suffering through investigations where people have been, General Flynn, where people have been so unfairly treated. The Russia hoax, it was all a hoax. The Mueller scam, it was all a scam. It was all false. I made a bad decision on one bad decision, Jeff Sessions, and now I feel good because he lost overwhelmingly in the great state of Alabama. Here's the bottom line. I've been very unfairly treated, and I don't say that as paranoid. Everybody says it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, but there's tremendous evidence right now as to how unfairly treated I was. President Obama and Biden spied on my campaign. It's never happened in history. If it were the other way around, the people would be in jail for 50 years right now. That would be Comey, that would be Brennan, that would be all of this, the two lovers, Strzok and Page. They would be in jail now for many, many years. They would be in jail. It would have started 2 years ago, and they'd be there for 50 years. The fact is, they illegally spied on my campaign. Let's see what happens. Despite that, I did more than any president in history in the first 3.5 years.
Mr. President, thank you.
Yeah, completely false and not true at all. That was that was an interesting interview. I think that Wallace was a little softer in some places, as I think it was Irate Lump pointed out. He went soft on Trump and redirected to abortion and issues like that. But I think Trump is going to walk away from this interview and call it a terrible interview, and Chris Wallace is being uncharitable him like he does to any Republican because he's secretly a closet socialist or whatever. But yeah, that was definitely interesting, definitely worth watching. And we got to watch Trump lie regularly, which is always a treat. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. Remember to like, share, and leave a comment because it helps me. Subscribe and ring that bell to help you. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.